Hi everyone, this is Nikki Jones, and this is my third segment of my testimony. I'm going to start out in the latter part of 1991. I had just started my sixth grade year at Ellie Wilson Middle School, and my brother, he had just started his first year of school in kindergarten at Blake Elementary School. It was the weekend of the new school year. I think we had just completed maybe either our first week or maybe first couple of days of school. It was the weekend, and my dad, he was outside and he was trimming the shrubs. And my brother and I were out there just assisting our dad, slash maybe kind of playing around a little bit too. And everything seemed to be going okay. And then my dad, he got hysterical, and he told me that I needed to go get my mom, that he wasn't feeling well and he needed help getting inside the house. And so I got on the front porch, and I remember screaming for my mom to come out, that dad wasn't feeling well and he needed help. She helped him inside, and they went inside my mom and dad's bedroom, and my dad, I think he got on their king-size bed, and she was sat on the bed, and she was trying to kind of, I guess, assess the situation and see how he was feeling. And I remember him saying something, or her first saying, "Hey, do you think you need to go to the ER?" And him saying, "No," just kind of making more light of the matter. I'll be okay. And her asking him a few more times, and him saying, "Well, if I do go to the ER, I need to take a shower first." And her saying, "Well, no, they won't care. I know that you are hot and sweaty, but they won't care if you're hot and sweaty. You need to go ahead and go." And she said, "Do you think you're having a heart attack?" And he said, "No, I don't think I am." And she said, "Well, your boss at 39 years old just about 3 weeks ago just had a heart attack. You might need to be checked, and you're 41. And so she had to do some coaxing, and because he was very reluctant. My dad wasn't a doctor person. He wasn't a very big fan of doctors. But she made a deal with him. She said, "Why don't we ride around?" She's like, "I'll drive, and we'll ride around a little bit. And if you start to feel better, we can go to a local gas station, maybe get a snack and a drink and see how you feel. But, however, if you don't start feeling well, then I'm going to take you to the ER." And he did agree to those terms. We lived in Sheffield, and she drove to Muscle Shoals, which was nearby. And it seemed like he was okay for a few minutes. And then we got close to Shoals Hospital. We were on Avalon Avenue in Muscle Shoals. And the next thing I know, he starts panicking, and he starts begging my mom to take him to the ER. And so she pulls up to the ER entrance, and she goes inside to get him some help. Well, he doesn't wait. He's in so much pain. He actually walks in, he sees a stretcher, and he gets on the stretcher. Me and my brother, we were left out in the car, and I was crying. I was scared because I didn't know what was going on. By the time that me and my brother do go inside, it's probably about 5 more minutes. And then the doctor comes out and says to my mom, "Ma'am, your husband's in the process of having a heart attack." And then I know that my mom, she's upset, and I know she calls some of our local family, and they come, and they pick up me and my brother. And so for the next, I'd say, week or two, we stay, actually more than a week. It was maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3. We are shuffled between family members, and I don't remember all of it because it was a whirlwind. I know I didn't miss any school because I was in 6th grade. My mom didn't want me to miss any school, so she tried to help have me stay on my regular schedule. I think my brother missed a couple of days of school, but he had just started kindergarten, so he wouldn't get us behind. And after, before my dad was released, I mean, he was at Shoals Hospital. They ended up having to transport him over to ECM Hospital because he was pretty severe. He was in pretty critical condition. And I remember being at my Aunt Harriet's house, and I was playing outside with my brother and my two of my cousins, Andy and Justin. I remember her telling us to come on to the hospital, and so we got in the car, and right when we got there, my dad was getting loaded into an ambulance, and I remember him telling us that he loved us, and we had to say goodbye and that we loved him too. And what I found out later was they didn't think that my dad was going to make it from Shoals Hospital to ECM Hospital. He was in such critical condition, they were scared that he was going to die in transport to the hospital. Thankfully, he made it. He had to have a 4 quadruple pass surgery. He had 2 50% arteries that were clogged and 2 that were 90% clogged. He had a long road of recovery ahead. He was because he had been in such critical condition. What we did was we moved in with my Uncle Bob and Aunt Virginia. They had a big house, and so we lived with them for 2.5 years. My grandmother, she had an adjoining apartment onto the house. Our house in Sheffield had gotten in pretty bad shape, and so that's why we moved into my aunt's house, because my dad, with him trying to recover from major surgery, he didn't need to be in a house that wasn't sanitary and was unclean and not in good shape. So that's why we moved in with my Uncle Bob and Aunt Virginia and their 2 children and my grandmother. Thankfully, it was a big house. It was a split level house, and on the main level they had a big living room and dining room, a nice big eat-in kitchen. Upstairs there was 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, and also there was another set of stairs that was behind a door that you opened up there, and my uncle had a really nice study up there with a skylight. And then if you get back on the main level, you go down another set of stairs. There was a nice den, and they also had a full-size bathroom and a laundry room. And then my grandmother's apartment, you opened a door, and then she had a nice apartment. It was a dining room, living room combo, and then there was a little kitchenette, and then you had her bedroom and her bathroom down there. And like I said, we lived there for 2.5 years. But during that time, my grandmother, when I was in 7th grade, I just started my 7th grade year, and my grandmother got sick. And not long after she got sick, we found out she had colon cancer. They had to do a surgery, and they got some of the tumors out, but they couldn't get all the tumors out. The surgeon said had they gotten all the tumors out, it would have killed her because of the locations of everything. And since my grandmother at the time, she was 83 years old, my family opted not to do chemotherapy because they didn't want to put her through that due to her age. They knew it would just be really hard on her. My grandmother, she lived about 4.5 months after that. It was hard on me to know that in my family because we loved her so much. She was my mama. I called her mama, and she was such a wonderful friend to me. She would make me homemade Play-Doh, and it was always green. She would make me homemade cookies. We'd pick, say, poke salad or turnip greens out in the yard, and she'd make good poke salad and turnip greens. But on February, I believe it was February 26th of 1993, my grandmother passed, and it was really hard for us. I know when she was sick, my aunt had moved her from her apartment up to my cousin Lee's room. My cousin was away at school, so she got Lee's room, and she had her colostomy bag, and she couldn't really get out of bed. She was really weak and frail. And so I'd go up there and I would talk to her, spend time with her. I also read to her from my book, Where the Red Fern Grows. And I remember I would be reading to her and I noticed her eyes were closed. And so I'd say, Mama, are you still listening? And she said, Yes, Sugar Booger, I'm just resting my eyes. And she was just such a sweet woman of God, and I really really miss her. Was just so sweet. In fact, she was my only grandparent that I really got to know very well because I just turned 13 when she died. As I said in my first segment of my testimony, I lost my pawpaw and my mama Trussell. That's my great grandmother. When I was 3.5 years old, and they died within like 3 weeks of each other. On my dad's side, his dad died when he was 16, so I never got to meet him. My mom didn't even get to meet him. That was before my mom and dad met. And then, sadly to say, my dad wasn't on speaking terms with his mother. They hadn't been on speaking terms for several years. And so, by the time that my grandmother died on my dad's side, I was 9 years old, but they had never reconciled. And so I missed out on an opportunity to have a relationship with my other grandmother. So by the time I was 13, I had lost all my great grandparents and grandparents. So she was very near and dear to me. Anyway, after that, and let me back up just a little bit. After my 6th grade year at Ellie Wilson Middle School, since we moved in with my aunt and uncle and my grandmother and my cousins, my parents transferred me and my brother over to Florence City Schools. And so my brother and I, we went to Hibbett School. It was a kindergarten through 8th grade school. And so 7th grade I went to Hibbett, and my brother went to Hibbett. I also went to Hibbett in 8th grade, and my brother went to Hibbett that same year. He was in 1st grade. Well, it was in my 8th grade year, we moved out of my aunt's house. My mom had gotten a job at Johnson's Daycare in Florence, and my mom and my dad had saved up some money, and they started renting an apartment D7. It was at Summit Ridge. It was 3 beds, 2 baths. It was a nice apartment. They had swimming pool, hot tub. It was a swimming pool. They had a jacuzzi and a sauna, and they had a tennis court, and they had a nice creek running back behind the apartments. Well, for about a year and a half, things were starting to look up, but by my 9th grade year, I had started at Bradshaw High School. My brother, he was still at Hibbett, and he was in his, I believe it was his 3rd grade year. It was March of 1995, my mother woke up one morning, and she was going to get ready to go to work. I was going to go to school. My brother was going to go to school, but when she woke up, she was in such pain, just immense pain. I'd never seen her in this much pain, that she couldn't even get out of bed, even to go to the bathroom, which was just a few feet away. And so she called into work, and I went to school. My brother went to school. My dad, I don't know if he called in in that day. He probably did, to stay home with my mom. But anyway, after that day, things were not the same. Uh, my mom was never able to return back to work. I would say, I don't remember the exact time frame, but it was probably about 2 months later. My mom did go to the doctor, and the doctor, it was just her primary care physician. He thought she just had a virus. And I was thinking to myself, I am 15 years old at the time, do not have a medical degree. And I'm thinking, there is no way that this is just a virus causing my mom to be in such pain and hardly be able to walk. Something major is going wrong on with my mom. And June the 12th of 1995, I had already finished my ninth grade year, and my brother had finished his third grade year. Of course, it was summertime, and it was my parents' 24th wedding anniversary. We had went out to eat, and then my mom decided that she wanted to try to find some like fruit and veggie stands, like local fruit and veggie stands, on the side of the road somewhere. She was, I guess, hankering for some fresh fruits and veggies, but not from the supermarket. She wanted some homegrown fruits and vegetables. So we went out riding and tried to find some, and then we came back home, and my mom was having such a hard time breathing. Where we lived, there was actually 4 flights of stairs. Going back to the apartment, there was a flight of stairs. Then, I'm sorry, not 4, 3 flights of stairs. Going in to the apartment, you had a flight of stairs going down. Then you had a flight of stairs going up. Then at the front door, after you open our front door, there's a flight of stairs going into the apartment that she'd have to climb up. And I remember she was really short of breath, having just a hard time breathing. And my dad ended up having to call 911. But at the time, we didn't even have a home phone. So I think what he had to do was at a local gas station, he had to use the pay phone, and he had to call 911. When 911 got there, they couldn't get the stretcher. Like, it was going to be hard for them to have to take it down a flight of stairs, up a flight of stairs, and up another flight of stairs, and then to have to take it down, and then up again. And so they assisted my mom to get down the flight of steps that was in the apartment, down the other flight of stairs, and then they helped her up the embankment. Instead of going up those other flight of stairs, there was an embankment, and they helped her up that embankment, and they got her into the ambulance. They took her to Shoals Hospital, and they found out at Shoals Hospital that she had blood clots in one of her lungs and one of her legs. And so she had to stay, I think it was at least a week, maybe week and a half, till all those blood clots dissolved. And then we went home, and she was on Coumadin, a blood thinner. And for a little bit, it seemed like she was getting better. But then, I don't remember, I think it was maybe the next month, she went to I think it was her OBGYN, and he suspected that she had ovarian cancer. So she had to go to Kirkland Clinic in downtown Birmingham. And I remember going with my parents. It was me and my mom and my dad and one of our former neighbors. It was our neighbor, one of our next door neighbors that lived right beside us when we lived in the house in Sheffield. She was a really great family friend, and she still is mine and Daniel's friend. But she went with us, and I believe that at that point in time, it was confirmed that she had ovarian cancer. So it was probably just a few weeks later, and she went to UAB Hospital to have a hysterectomy, and it was August the 14th of 1995, and she left to go to UAB Hospital. And I remember that morning, I woke up early, and we were staying at my Aunt Helen's house, Honestly, between probably sometime in July to that point, August, we had either been staying at my Aunt Helen's house or my Aunt Harriet's house because with my mom having those that major pain and the blood clots, she couldn't walk up all those stairs. So my Aunt Harriet's house was one level, and even though my Aunt Helen's was a two-story, they had a spare room that was on the first floor, and so it was much easier for my mom to manage. So we'd been staying with her, and it was the morning that she was going to UAB to have her hysterectomy, or to go down to do the hysterectomy, even though it wasn't going to be that day. She was supposed to have her surgery the next day. She was really upset. She was crying, and she was like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. And my dad and I were trying to reassure, you're going to be okay. But she was like, I'm going to die. I know I'm going to die. And she was really upset. So we were trying to comfort her. And I remember when she got out to the car, I gave her a hug and kiss. And I told her that I loved her. And for some reason, I'd been saying this phrase for a while, but I told her, I said, bye-bye, little mommy, parting is such sweet sorrow. And those were the last words that I was going to say to her. And I watched the car go as far as I could go. And that was the last time I saw my mom alive. The next evening, like the next day, she had her surgery. And that night, my uncle and a couple of my aunts and my brother and I, we went to UAB Hospital. And it wasn't long when we found the room that my mom had been staying in. And we met my dad, and he let my brother and I get a snack from the snack machine. Well, right as I go out of the snack machine room, I see this doctor. I'd never seen him before, but I honestly, when you just get this gut feeling, I didn't even know who he was, but I knew something was wrong. And I start busting into tears, and my Aunt Harriet puts her arm around me and she starts comforting me. Well, as he passes me, he goes to my dad and he talks to my dad. And then when he quits talking to my dad, we go up to my dad, and my dad says, a clot's broke loose, and we don't know if we're going to be able to save her. And so we go back to the room that they had been staying in, and about 5 minutes later, the doctor pokes his head in and he says, I'm sorry, but we've lost her. And I remember screaming, and I'm like, no, not my mama, not my mama. And I remember feeling nauseated, sick to my stomach, like I was going to throw up. And I go in the bathroom, and I just can't believe it. And I remember coming out, and I remember seeing, my family members, and I'm just in shock. And we go out of her room and see a nurse, and I personally asked the nurse, can I see my mother? And I get to go in the room that she was in, and my mom, I remember her lips were blue with purple dots. She had something over her head, and then I remember she had something right here. I ended up finding out from my aunt that it was a filter to try to catch a blood clot, and there was blood around it. And I remember reaching down to feel her hand, and it was already cold and stiff. And I mean, honestly, if I didn't have God, I wanted to die that night. I felt like I was so broken because I was a mama's girl, and I had just, besides the Lord, my mom was my best friend, and I felt like I had lost my best friend, and it had been really hard from 1991 to 1995 to almost watch my dad die of a heart attack, losing my grandmother, losing my mom, losing my childhood home because they had to sell it because it was in bad shape, having to change schools 2 more times. It was just a lot of changes. And I know if it wasn't for the grace of God, I wouldn't have been able to overcome that. It was just so hard. I do want to show you some pictures from like some of those time periods. Just I like to show pictures to kind of connect you with everything, but this right here is a pic of, well, this first picture right here, sorry, is a picture of my dad with his work crew, and he's in the back row with a mustache, and the lady in front of him was his boss, and she was the one that had the heart attack at 39, but she ended up being okay. This is my dad again at work at a hospital party. And this right here is a picture I really like of my dad. He was with me and my brother, and this was when the house was in much better shape. And this is the house that I grew up in. And in this picture, I believe I was in 4th grade. And this right here is a picture of my grandmother. I love this picture of her. I just thought she was stunningly beautiful. And this is another picture of my grandmother. That was at my 7th birthday party. And this is a picture of my grandmother with my brother and I. I was 6 and my brother, he was 5 months old. And this is a picture of my grandmother, my grandfather, of course, my mama and papa. And this was a picture of my mom when she was a little girl. I thought she was just a cute little girl, wasn't she? So pretty. And this was with her when she was a teenager. I think she was more like maybe 13, 14. Here's another picture of her when she was young. And here's a picture of her when I was 4. And here was a picture before she died. I thought she was so beautiful. I loved my mom very much. And this was in 1994 before she passed away. And it's really hard, but this was my mom at her funeral. And it was really hard at the funeral because I didn't want to accept that she was dead. And I remember when she was laying in the casket, I wanted to be the last person to leave because I was scared that they were going to bury her alive. I was so scared. I remember thinking, please, Mom, please wake up. Please come home with us. I was so worried because I didn't want to lose her. I loved her very much. But I'm thankful that I know that my mom loved Jesus and that we will be reunited again one day. I will show you a few pictures. This was when I was in 7th grade. And this was, let me find. This is when I was a sophomore in high school, right after my mom passed. Because I just was fixing to start my sophomore year of high school. But instead of, actually it was the week we were supposed to register for school, we were burying my mom that same day. And I started my sophomore year the very next week. This is when I was in 9th grade. Oh, and this is right before my dad had his first heart attack. We just started school. That was on the first day of school. But soon I will start my 4th segment very soon. And I pray that you all have a blessed night. And please know that whatever you're going through, especially if it's a loss, if you lose a loved one, know that God is with you. And He'll wrap His loving arms around you and He will comfort you. Just lean into Him. That's what I've learned to do. And you all have a very blessed night.